people are joining in case they've
of course
started. We're only chit-chatting, everybody. So Dar's here from the CCMA, and you're all very welcome this morning to our webinar. You'll see on screen Leigh, Dave and Anne-Marie, and I'll be formally handing over to Leigh shortly. Delighted to be joined by all these people who are lovely people from Cork this morning. So it's great that our last webinar of the year is going to be from the real capital. I can say that because I'm married to a Cork man, so it's safe to do. So I can see Niall and Chris and David and Paul all on board, and Orla and Caroline. So you're all very welcome. So as always, we're just going to give it a couple of minutes. And we really want this morning's webinar to be as interactive as possible. And we really think this is a hot topic because we all know we've had this roller coaster since March of highs and lows with COVID and the impact on all of our operations. And the biggest impact has obviously been on our people and on the individuals and the teams that many of whom are working remotely. And for those of you who've been on previous webinars, you'll know we've looked at things like coaching, well-being, engaging, and they're all still a big challenge. And as we go into the new year, we know we're probably going to be in this situation for at least another 6 months. From talking to companies, I know most people seem to be saying June, July timeframe is when they see themselves potentially going back into the office, subject to no further waves, all going well. So we really just want to talk this morning about these three lovely experts are going to speak to us about is, you know, how to boost your team. And I know this is the time of the year, we were just talking as all of you were joining there about people beginning to wind down. So we know people are winding down, organizations are winding down, but planning is a crucial part of this time of the year to be ready for January, to keep people motivated, because January normally is a tough year anyway. So delighted to be joined, as I say, by Leigh, Dave and Anne-Marie. Leigh, I'm going to hand over to you now. I'll let you do the formal introductions. And I know just on the housekeeping side of things, we're recording the webinar. People can put up questions, chat, comments. If you want to get involved in the discussion, please feel free to do that as well. And we'll have the recording and a copy of the presentation available afterwards. But I'll hand over to you now, Leigh. So thanks a million.
Great. Thanks a million for that, Dorothy. And yes, please do feel free to fire questions at us throughout. And if you want to not use the chat, if you'd like to talk, just drop me a line and I can unmute you so that you can actually talk to our speakers here today. So I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. Okay. Right, so now, oops. So anyway, welcome to the CCMA Ask the Expert event, and we're here to talk about Team Boost and really how to give your team a boost in 2021. And boy, do most teams need it after the corona coaster we've all been on for the last 9 to 10 months. And I think we'll all agree that personally and professionally it's been tough, but I suppose we're here specifically to talk on the professional side and to talk about teams, and that's why we're here today. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself. Each of our speakers, Dave and Anne-Marie, will also introduce themselves individually, so they do their own introductions as such. So my own background is I've been in events for 20 years, in corporate events, running a business events, and here's some gorgeous pictures of fun events we had over the years. And it was all great. I actually loved it until March, you know, so a bit of drama there in March, obviously. With coronavirus, everything stopped on the event side. So you can only imagine what that was like. It was like meltdown, event meltdown. I was like trying to figure out what to do. So events look very, very different now. It's all broadcasting studios, Zoom calls, webinars like this one. And this is the new norm. Sorry, I hate to say that, but that is the reality of it. So this is what's happening with events right now. And it's a necessary evil. Some of us love it, some of us hate it. Certainly in a work environment, when we'll get further into that later when we're talking about Team Boost, some people really, really struggle with it, you know. So I suppose back to the whole why the Team Boost thing then and where it came from. Well, I suppose, you know, talking to clients, all of us, you know what I mean, over the last few months, we realized that, you know, clients were, I suppose, experiencing difficulties with the teams were feeling disconnected. Even anecdotally, friends and colleagues of mine saying how, you know, some people were like, oh, I really miss the kind of the conversations in the kitchen, and we're feeling disconnected, and it's very hard to get things done, and I don't feel supported, even though technically there's a support mechanism there, but I'm feeling disconnected from my team. And obviously teams work better when they when they have a nice cohesion between them. Everything felt very transactional. Zoom calls, team meetings all felt a bit transactional, and therefore I suppose again, you know, didn't help with that disconnection feeling. People felt disconnected from the organization as well. So even in an organization where, you know, they're very valued, and they still felt quite disconnected from the organization and not part of I suppose any strategy. So again, it was like, again, I think it was partly to do with my own background. I was with Cork Chamber for many years, so I get a lot of those phone calls of, can I pick your brains, and do you know anybody who would do this, and do you know anybody who would do that? And there was a little bit of this and that. And actually, when I looked around for people in order to help companies, I was like, well, there's people doing this, and then there's people doing that, but there's nobody doing all three things: the organization, the individual in the team, and the team building, the fun side of things. So it's like, you know, maybe this is something you could kind of put together and make it a little bit easier for people. So then we just launched Team Boost in late November. So like, we're pretty new, like we're just hot off the presses. So you're getting an exclusive here today with us. But yeah, so we launched it there very recently, and actually already we've had massive interest in the product, and it's been so much fun so far talking to companies about what they need for next year. So to that end, I'm going to introduce the first up, Dave A. Barry from Conexion. He's one of my colleagues on this project, and Dave is going to take over there now and talk a little bit more about the organizational side.
Thanks,
over to you,
Leigh.
Dave. Yeah.
Are you going to, am I going to share? Perfect, thank you. So who is Dave A. Barry? So first of all, just to briefly explain the A, so while I was at Lilly, there was 3 Dave Barrys essentially working with Lilly at the time. So with the middle name Anthony, thankfully I got to be listed alphabetically before John and Michael. So that's where that name came from, and it's kind of stuck. So as you're seeing on the slide there, I founded Conexion.ie back in 2018, and a lot of the work this year, back to some of what Leigh talked about, has been more online and speaking, and then I also part-time lecture for UCC in HR and leadership as well, all of which again has moved online this year. So from a background perspective, I have, as I described it, 20+ years HR, leadership and talent management. And a lot of that time was at Eli Lilly for 13 years and Trend Micro for almost 4. And then there's been other chunks of work kind of in between there as well. But it all led up to establishing Conexion in October 2018. And just to kind of briefly say, back to kind of the Eli Lilly and Trend Micro. So for me, the reason that I stayed, 13 years, at Eli Lilly, for Trend Micro, less time at other companies, was really linked to how connected I felt, to the culture and to strategically kind of where they were going, and what it felt to work there, what it felt like to work there. So, if you were to look at my LinkedIn and see less chunks of time elsewhere, that's why, again, I felt connection more in some organizations than others. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to talk about here is context and insights into the first piece of Team Boost, which is called the big picture. And what we did here was very much designed for teams, and back to some of what Leigh said on our first slide as well around connection, that this first session is essentially a 75-minute organizational review, and very much keeping recent employee data in mind. So what I'm going to talk about now in the next couple of slides is both connection and also data that inspired us to create this particular piece of Team Boost. Next slide. And so from particularly a Conexion perspective, what is connection? So as I alluded to earlier, for me in kind of creating Conexion and the work that I've been doing with clients that we have instilled into the design of Team Boost here, it's very much around these 3 organizational elements connecting. So with culture, we would describe it as who we are, and so things like, do we have a defined vision? And do we have a defined mission and purpose? Do we have values? And some clients, for instance, that I have worked with along the way, might have had 11 values. The magic number is 3. So with kind of culture within Connection, it is very much about who we are as an organization. Strategically, where are we heading? Commercially, from a customer perspective, from a talent perspective, And then from a people, what it's like to work here. And that's end to end, talent management of brand and attraction, management and development, engagement and retention. I know this is a bit of a tall order, but ultimately, what this slide is saying is that when we have each of our culture, strategy and people, strategy defined, linked, communicated, and we end up with a connected organization. And that's why, again, I stayed 13 years, at Lilly in particular, and because I felt the connection to their culture, to their strategy, and what it was like to work there the most. So a lot of what Conexion is looking to achieve and through Team Boost here is creating the same sense, of connection pre-COVID, of, again, are these things defined, linked, communicated. And the reason I've underlined development there before moving on is something that doesn't necessarily kind of feature in the data slide on the next slide that I'm going to talk through. But particularly for the millennial generation, I think, I know from having lots of conversations that there is some angst, in that, like age population in particular around development, so this year, because obviously a lot of the focus was around survival and getting through COVID, etc. Some elements of development, had to be cancelled or didn't happen. So, as we were likewise designing Team Boost, and Anne-Marie will particularly talk about this, if development, has felt kind of stalled for people, and particularly millennials this year, then we didn't want to forget about this element, of reminding people that this part of Team Boost in particular, but the entire thing, is both, around connection and boosting, but also developmental. Next slide. There's a lot on this one, but I'm going to talk through it quite quickly. So I'm going to talk kind of across the slides. So just to give some context here, the CIPD back in June and the Chemie Business School at University of Limerick in September did a lot of research into how employees are actually feeling during COVID, and particularly with an eye on coming out of COVID. And the first theme that really came through in both surveys was around remote working and employee engagement. So like back in June when CIPD did that survey, there was obviously large percentages of organizations had very large percentages of employees based remote. But what was kind of an alarming stat for us was that coming out of the Chemie one in particular, 51% of employees were feeling less team connected and 40% of employees were feeling organizationally disconnected. So there's clearly something going on there, that is organization related, and that because people are no longer physically together, that, from a remote basis, there is some organizational and team disconnect, which is not going to be a surprise to any of us, but, to see those percentages, certainly for me personally at the time was a real kind of shock, I think, to have them that high. So the next theme underneath there then is around employee concerns and well-being, and also absence. So in the CIPD survey, employees were listing, their main concerns. Childcare was the highest one, health and mental health, followed by transport. And as you're seeing there, large percentages had to take time off for childcare. But the stat underneath is quite interesting, that 43% of companies are seeing less absence, and 41% are seeing the same, and 12% are seeing an increase. Now that really is indicating that with remote working, if people are feeling unwell, not necessarily with COVID, but any type of physical or mental health condition, that's less obvious now in the working environment, because how do you take time off or stay at home when your working environment is now home? And over on the other side, there's some high stats there around kind of increased levels of stress, and there is a gender difference going on as well between kind of female and male around the experiencing of the difficulties. But across the board, almost 70% are saying there that they would love a blend of, working from home and the office going forward. So, models like 2 days at home, 3 in the office, 3 at home, 2 in the office. I mean, those kind of models are really what people are expressing desire for going forward. And the last piece on this slide is around manager check-ins, you know, and an element of management disconnect. So if you quickly go into the middle of the slide there, where again, employees were stating that their you know, highest concern was childcare, followed by health and mental health, and then transport. If you go down to the last line here in the middle, you know, what managers are then having conversations with people around is, you know, how are you getting on working remotely, 48%, you know, questions about their health and mental health, 40, and childcare, you know, is 31. So there's a bit of an inverse going on there as to what is actually concerning employees and is driving some of the disconnect and the, you know, the stress and stuff that they're feeling with the conversations, you know, that managers are having. So 70% of employees do feel that their managers are being supportive during COVID, but 35% of the managers themselves and feel that their organizations could do more. So what you're seeing on the slide is there's something organization related is contributing to this disconnect that we're talking about. And there's something individual, and let's not overly assume that the middle kind of stats are entirely gender related, because there's a lot of more individual factors going on, which Anne-Marie will touch on again within her session, as to why people have had very different experiences and coping you know, during remote working and during COVID. And it's not just gender is driving, not just gender itself is driving some of the differentials that we're seeing there in the middle. And then there's something leadership. And I know middle managers always get a hard time. To be fair, it's not an easy role, particularly during COVID. But there is some, again, disconnect between what's actually bothering employees and then what the conversations that managers are having with them, you know, are not quite lining up. Next slide, Leigh, please. So how to reconnect then, you know, based on everything that we've just seen there. And so from an organizational perspective, again, when we saw those stats around, you know, high percentages of employees feeling disconnected to both the organization and to their team. Like a lot of research and a lot of the work that the Conexion does, you know, with clients is really around, you know, to move forward, that we have to look back. And so within the big picture session, it's very much looking about how, in this case, 2020 and with COVID in the mix, like how has it actually impacted, you know, on who we are, our culture, you know, where we're heading, our strategy, and then what it's like to work here. And the flavor of this session will not end up being, you know, kind of negative. It's very balanced it's really asking, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of global pandemic, you know, what elements of us as an organization actually went really well, and we should, you know, take stock of that and be proud of that. What things could have gone differently, you know, around how we operated during 2020. And then what do we particularly need to keep an eye on going forward into 2021. So again, the flow and the feel and the intent, you know, of the big picture, which is the first part of 3 in Team Boost, is really around having a balance to look back to help, you know, us reconnect faster and, you know, in a more data point driven way in 2021. And my last thing to talk to here before handing over to Anne-Marie is, as we saw in the data earlier there was a whole load of individual factors going on, you know, which were contributing to people's experience during COVID, including for leadership. But again, as we boost, you know, and look forward into 2021, the more aware that we are of ourselves and others, and the more effectively that we can work together. So again, you know, based on this year and some of the experiences that people have had, some of the leadership disconnects, you know, around what's bothering employees to what managers are talking to them about, you know, what dial ups, you know, from you know, a style or an emotional intelligence perspective, you know, might be required, or sometimes it's a dial down, you know, where someone's overly emotionally connected, and they found, you know, COVID particularly challenging because they've taken on, you know, a lot of the angst and the stress, you know what I mean, that other people are likewise feeling. But Anne-Marie is the expert here, so she's going to talk more about that. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Anne-Marie, who will provide context into me and my team, and also her own background.
Okay, thanks, Dave. That's great. I'm just going to share my screen now. So I'm part of the Team Boost group, along with my very good colleague, Aideen Shannon, who looks at the personality profiling side of things, and I look at the emotional intelligence side of things. So it's all about you and your team, and to give the team a team boost for 2021. So as David said, you know, teams have gone through an awful lot of tough times. So a team boost is what they all need now for 2021 and going through the year, especially with this remote work environment for a lot of people. So just to introduce myself very quickly, I'm a trainer and coach in behavioral change. I graduated in 1984 in UCC with the BA HDIP and went teaching. But of course, that was a big recession then, and I didn't get a permanent job. So I opened my own business with my partner, and the two of us ran the business for quite a number of years when I decided I was very interested in the HR and people side of running the business. So I went and I did some quals in HR and moved into that area in 1989. So I've been working in all types of industry and business in a HR and then specializing in T&D and in learning. It's always been in my DNA, working with people on their development and on their growth. So I met Dave in Eli Lilly. Again, it was my longest employer as well. I was there 12 years, which is really unusual. Prior to that, it was 3 to 4 years in any company. So I specialized in coaching when I was in Eli Lilly, and I did my qualifications while there and came out again in the next recession in the end of 2011 to work for myself as a freelance trainer and coach. And my area and my passion is behavioral change. So with that in mind, emotional intelligence sits very well for me in the whole area of behavioral change. That's why I'm talking to you today, because as part of Team Boost, we really can see the power of development and growth and understanding around personality type and around emotional intelligence. So what is emotional intelligence? I'm sure you have heard a lot about it, but I'm here to kind of give you a bit of a taste of what it actually is. So first of all, this is a very good definition of emotional intelligence. It's a set of emotional and social skills. And we are emotional animals. Sorry now, you know, we can't leave our emotions at the door when we come to work. We're human beings. And that's actually what has set us aside from the rest of the species on Earth, is we are very complex emotional beings. So emotional intelligence helps you to make intelligence of your emotions and helps you to, if you have the skills, to perceive and express yourself well, to develop your social relationships, and in particular to help you cope with challenges and use your emotions in an effective and meaningful way, not in a destructive way, but in a collaborative way, which is ideal for leadership and ideal for teams. We all know what, when we see poor emotional intelligence, we all know what that looks like. We all know what it feels like to meet somebody who is emotionally intelligent. And I'll give you some examples next. What I do want to just tell you is that, first of all, IQ is important also. So we're not saying, you know, general intelligence isn't important. Of course it is, but you inherit it from your genetics. And there's nothing really you can do to change your IQ. You're born with it. But EQ, which is the emotional quotient, is totally malleable. And it's a lifelong journey developing it and growing it. So anyone from any age up to forever can grow and develop their emotional intelligence. It's not unique to any culture across the globe because we're all human beings with emotions. Of course, there'll be cultural aspects involved in how emotions are, it's acceptable to express them or not across cultures, but this applies to everyone, emotional intelligence across all cultures. It's not a cure either for maybe poor communication, poor team spirit, but it certainly helps if you have emotionally intelligent people on your team and an emotionally intelligent team leader. And it's not unique to females, because a lot of people think, oh, this is nice stuff. Oh, women are very good at it. That's so not true. And it's not nice stuff. It's hard developing your emotional intelligence, hard work. Okay, this is the wheel of emotional intelligence using the validated psychometric tool, the EQI. You may be familiar with this, or you may be familiar with the ECR, which is used widely in IMI, which I also use with IMI. But this one I love. It has 15 dimensions, all around how we see ourselves, how we express ourselves, how we collaborate and work with other people, how we make decisions, and how we manage stress using our emotions in a positive way. So, you know, with stress management, Dave has very much pointed this out here. You know, in the Team Boost workshop, this is an area that we will focus on because of COVID, because of all the changes and the blend of learning and remote working and the stresses that people are under daily, listening to the radio and all the bombardment of what's happening at the moment in our world. Stress management is back on the agenda, and well-being is very high up on the agenda as well. So emotional intelligence will help people to cope better with change, with challenge, and with the remote working experience. So I have a very good example of a very good example of an area here that you're all familiar with, and that is Theresa May. You know, she was hailed as someone who's very tolerant and very strong, and she withstood so much, but she wasn't flexible. So you could be strong in one or two elements of emotional intelligence and then not have it in balance with other areas. And overall, we all know if we use a strength too far, it goes against us, unfortunately. Self-expression, very important area, especially for management, showing your vulnerability as a manager and as a leader to draw people in towards you rather than push them away. Again, areas like assertiveness, really important on a team as well, so that you can put forward your ideas with strength. Again, I would have Theresa May firmly in that area where her emotional expression was extremely poor. She wasn't able, we all know that awful dance she did, God love her. Interpersonally, a very important area for teams. And when we look at the Team Boost section on personality and also on emotional intelligence, this is a big area for us. How we show empathy towards other people, how we can build relationships so that we're all moving, like David said, towards the purpose of the team, towards realizing the values together. Therefore, empathy and understanding other people's perspectives and letting our own one go so we can embrace other people is really, really important. And a key area is obviously decision making and problem solving at work. So teams come together to innovate, to create, to work together towards the purpose. So the stronger the team is in emotional intelligence, the more it will achieve in this area in particular. And impulse control, which is self-regulation of our emotions, is key in this area. It's really key for leaders. And we see a very good example of that worldwide in Donald Trump, who would have, I would say, very obviously, very low levels of impulse control. You start with self-awareness. So in Team Boost, when we come to this section, if it is emotional intelligence and if it is our personality profiling with the AD, we will always start with self-awareness. So why bother? Why? Well, it's obvious, you know, emotional intelligence has been around since the concept has been around an awful long time, but became very popular in the 1980s. I love this quote: "Without being a source of energy for others, very little can be accomplished." The CEO of Microsoft. I totally and utterly agree with that. Even now online, we try to be a source of energy. It's much more difficult saying it into a camera. So that's why building up emotional intelligence and skills, especially for customer-focused organizations, is key to the success of a team. So, you know, guys, if you decide to take up the Team Boost workshop and choose personality profiling or emotional intelligence as this developmental slot, these are the kinds of things you can expect from your teams. similar research done there in 2019 by Harvard across the globe has done really powerful results and benefits for especially customer-driven teams. For example, MedExcel Healthcare. Let you read that. Like, we want our people to be more empathetic and feel empowered. So team boost type events give the teams this empowerment. The training around emotional intelligence, personality profiling, values, purpose-driven understandings for call centers allows the personnel to be relationship builders and missionaries, according to Gucci. The USBS Bank, you know, this is what the banking sector is looking for, especially in light of recent times to do with banking, especially when they're dealing with direct line customers, is a strong emotional connection so customers don't up and go to the competition. And finally, the Four Seasons Hotel Group have been very strong in this area, and they recognize emotional intelligence as a significant critical success factor in their corporate culture. So we mustn't forget the fun aspects of everything. And I'd like to hand over to Leigh now so she can talk you through, you know, we want to have fun as well. The fun has gone out of our lives with this pandemic. Everyone is suffering and people have lost people in their lives. So I'll hand over to Leigh now just to do that final part of Team Boost, which is, of course, the fun elements. Thanks, Leigh.
You might flick it on for me. Thanks a million, Anne-Marie. That was very interesting, as always. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here now, guys. This is basically the reward for all the hard work that you and your team have put in up to now. So we have a variety of things at the end. Anything from 20 minutes, 30 minutes, up to 45, even an hour. With scavenger hunts, quizzes, paint and sip. We've virtual murder mysteries, depending on how well you get on with your team. I don't know if I'd choose that. So there's lots of different things you can do between, as I say, 20 minutes to 45 minutes. So, you know, the Team Boost, while it is packaged up, is generally pretty flexible in that, yes, it's 75 minutes and yes, it's 90 minutes, but that element at the end. So if we wanted to extend a tiny bit in the middle, you could do, because you've got some leeway at the end. So basically that's kind of really us in a nutshell. Thank you so much for coming along. Dorothy, I don't even know if there are any questions, if we've time, if we've gone over time, but we'd be delighted to take any questions if there are anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm conscious of time, but I think we've time certainly for a couple of questions. So just for everybody on the call to understand, what you're talking about here is a sort of a half-day workshop that, as both Anne-Marie and Dave have talked about, is a structured workshop. Sort of numbers-wise, what are we talking about, the maximum or the minimum, Leigh, just to give people an idea?
Yeah, well, we've kind of said, you know, I suppose the different elements, not to be too big a crowd. We've kind of said a max of 15 per, you know, so somewhere between 10 and 15. Okay. You know, and then I suppose it's a slightly different approach. As Dave would allude to, there's a slightly different approach if it's under 10. But I mean, ultimately, I said, as long as it's impactful, and I think anything more than 15 wouldn't be impactful, you know.
Perfect. And what we're saying as well, in terms of giving a boost, it can be an actual team, or you could, which you'd normally do in an organization if people were physically together, mix up teams, because often the people in the contact center, you know, never get to meet the people in marketing, in production, depending on what business you're in. So this can be used across teams, Dave, I presume, as well as within an actual sort of customer service or technical support team.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and this is why there is kind of an organizational piece, you know what I mean? That if you were to mix teams up, you know, they're in the same organization. So, you know, giving perspective, you know, on the same place of work. And with the developmental piece that Anne-Marie talked to, like, it's so individual within a team that you're in. So absolutely, it can be, you know, set teams or a mix of teams, because again, it's been designed to be flexible for both.
Great. And Anne-Marie, then my last question, I suppose, is just around the personalities on teams. And I think we've all talked about it. And I know Niall is on the call from Virgin. You know, the highs and lows of people can be in great form one day, and then just, you know, with all of us, it's happening with this pandemic. But having that profile and understanding those personality traits are very important, I presume.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So what I've found with team building in relation to personalities is what's wonderful is we would look at your own individual personality type versus other people on the team. And suddenly the scales fall from the eyes going, oh, that's why I find Joan so difficult and annoying, because we're so different and we clash as a result. And suddenly there's, let's see what it is about Joan that actually is okay and I like. And so you kind of suddenly find I'm aware of the impact I'm having on Joan. She's the same. And the understanding around personality, it just starts to build the team. And then you can look at how best to communicate with me given my personality type. So in Team Boost, when we look at personalities, that's what we'll be looking at, an understanding of your own, and then a really deeper understanding of the personalities you have to deal with every day at work, on teams, clients, managers, stakeholders, and take that into account when you're trying to influence, get your ideas across, maybe conflict resolution in particular. It's very powerful for, because I have found, you know, as being part of a team recently myself, that I had to go off camera and go, oh, and then come back on camera, because just somebody on the team, like, you know, is so different to me. And I had to self-regulate, breathe. It's really hard to do on camera. It's really hard to do on camera. So these areas of understanding become even more important, Dorothy.
Yeah, Dorothy, just to add as well, I mean, obviously in the design of Team Boost as a half day that has the organizational piece, the team piece and the fun piece. I mean, what we're really looking to do is to start boosting the team, you know, with something like this. So for instance, the Me and My Team is really, you know, an introduction, albeit very detailed, you know, into either the personality types or emotional intelligence. And likewise with the organizational work, I mean, if any team needs more or deeper, you know, that's what our core businesses are, you know. So we very much, I guess, designed this as, you know, almost like a quick win, you know, to kind of start the journey of reconnection and Team Boost. But it's very much designed that if someone's really resonating, you know, with the content and wants to go deeper, like, we're ready to go likewise with that follow-on collaboration.
Absolutely. Like, we can design anything around any aspect of the Team Boost areas, like, and absolutely you could do fantastic things around vision and values, even getting down to team charters. But also on emotional intelligence, you can design a workshop around any of the 15, and I've done loads on conflict resolution, you know, collaboration, negotiation, influencing, or whatever the team needs. So that would be like follow-ons from the initial one that Dave is talking about, which
exactly. I think these intro sessions, you know, will clearly gather pointers, you know, of things that, you know, may be causing more kind of problems than others. So as I said, it's really been designed to kind of high level cover much, and then, you know, go deeper as a client, you know, and a team may require.
Brilliant. I'm conscious of time, Leigh. Obviously, anybody on the call that needs further information can either contact you directly, Leigh. I think we'll have your contact details at the very end, or obviously drop me an email. I'm happy to share the contact details. And I must say,
thanks, Emery.
For companies, there's the details there, but again, feel free to contact me directly. But I actually think even for companies, you know, by showing that you're putting this investment in your teams, just show you, it'll make the teams appreciate, you know, how important they are and how the company really is trying to support them. So, so everybody to obviously think about it, have a look back over the presentation, and I know Leigh, Dave, and Anne-Marie be delighted to have a chat with you and just explain to you how they could work with you.
We have a brochure as well if anybody wants us to pop on a brochure to them. It's got a wee bit more detail in it, you know, so feel free to contact us or Dorothy. It's great to talk to you.
Great. Well, thanks so much. And the recording will be up as soon as I get the link from Leigh, which will be there as tomorrow. It'll be on the events page if you want to share it with colleagues. And just to say to everybody, thank you so much for participating and for taking part today. And obviously, thank you very much to Leigh, Dave, and Anne-Marie. So thank you all and take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Happy Christmas to you and your family. Take care. Bye.